A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Thank you for joining us on an effervescent celebration of some seriously cool young South African brands on a day that we raise a glass of bubbles and pay tribute to a new wave of young South African winemaking talent, which all comes together under the auspices of one of Johannesburg's favourite events on the wine calendar. The Johannesburg Cup Classique and Champagne Festival is just a couple of weeks away. Darielle Robertson has once again woven together not just a collection of the better known and more established Cup Classique and Champagne brands, but also some of the new stars on the scene who are ready to burst out and show off some really exciting South African bubbles at the festival with Sanlam Private Wealth in a couple of weeks' time at Inanda. And so that is what we are talking about today. We have 4 of those brands with us and 4 very cool young wine people to take us through not only how they got to where they are, but where the future looks for South African bubbles for these young up-and-coming brands. Really excited to have a look at them and to see what they have to offer and to find out a little bit more from Darielle about this year's event, which is always a blue and white extravaganza, a wonderful one to get to, and one that most people tend to get their tickets for too late and thus do not get tickets because it does tend to sell out rather quickly. So as well as learning a lot about bubbles and the South African Cup Classique scene today, your other piece of learning to take away is please go and get your tickets before they sell out. Weekend of the 25th and 26th of March. Darielle will give us some details in a moment. That's where you get them over at Web Tickets, and it promises to be a glorious afternoon. It's been a pretty good week here in Johannesburg. We've had some more exciting developments with our friends at Norman Goodfellows. I'll tell you more about those a little later on in the show. Also had the chance yesterday to drink some quite old Bordeaux alongside some old Stellenbosch with Michael Friedjon and Mandla Mlangeni. And it was really interesting drinking some Bordeaux from both 1970 and 1976 alongside an admittedly slightly older South African red in the form of a Le Bonheur blend from 1984. It was the Le Bonheur that stood out. It took probably 20-30 minutes to find its feet after it had been decanted, but it really started coming into its own. It hadn't developed any of those nasty, rusty, tertiary notes that kind of blur the edges of the wine and take some of the fruit and replace it with rust instead. It stood firm. It had some really nice red fruit to it. Was another great example of South African wine that can stand a considerably longer test of time than is sometimes given credit for. So that's been one of my highlights of the wine week. Another is talking to our Bubbles quartet on the show in a moment. But before we do that, here's some of the latest wine news. Well, let's start with news that the De Toren Private Cellar Edition Z, the 2018 vintage, is just about ready to go. It is the full house of Bordeaux varietals, Merlot, Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. And De Toren, for some time now, have set a considerable bar when it comes to making high-end, fine red blends, wines that take the tradition of Bordeaux and don't reinvent them, but definitely give them a Stellenbosch spin in terms of the terroir and the touch of winemaking talent. That's Charles Williams who's behind those wines, and that is almost ready to go. So if you would like to get your hands on some and some high-end Bordeaux blend style Stellenbosch red is on your agenda, then you'll need to head over to the De Toren website and get in touch with them, try and get onto the shortlist for people looking to stock up with some of that wine. 2018, one of those even years that sits between the more rock star odd years of the last decade or so. But I've had some 2018 in the last little while, and it has been very pleasing indeed. I think it's a vintage that, not unlike 17, is going to grow into itself maybe just a little slower than a more blockbuster year like 15. So if you'd like some, De Toren's website is where you need to be headed. And the Strauss & Co auction. This is basically a plot by Roland Peens and Susie Goodman and the team at Strauss to bankrupt me and make sure my children never go to university. Because every time I promise myself I'm not going to spend more money on a Strauss auction, they come up with some extremely good wine. And this year, the wine celebrates a decade. So you're going back 2013. Now, this ties in, and we'll have some more information on it in a moment, to the Wine Magazine 10-year report. A number of those 10-year wines will be on show at this particular auction, but there are also wines as usual from across Europe, but the selection of South African wines is terrific. There's some old wine from Buchenhardskloof. There's some 2013 Annie Else, I think. But if you can't get it there, you can get it over at our digital pop-up store at Norman Goodfellows. And that we'll find out next week from the team at Annie Else did particularly well. You can see in picture there some of the Cederberg that also got a really good rating. De Grendel, I think, got 93 points for its 10-year-old Shiraz. And there are also a couple of white wines as well. So if you like your wine a little older, if you want to find especially reds that are in a perfect drinking window right now, then Wine Mag and Strauss & Co. have done all the hard work for you. That auction closes on Monday at 6 p.m. It's a timed auction, Strauss & Co. for some 10-year-old wine from both South Africa and from Europe. In fact, there is the 10-year report, and top of the list for the whites, 94 points, the Takara Directors Reserve. This brings together very simply Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. It is the classic Bordeaux white blend, and it is one that Takara have been getting so right over the last few years. This particular wine has won a lot of awards, got a lot of really high rankings, and that is one that sits just above another Takara wine, in this case, the Reserve Chardonnay, just a year back. And both of these wines, with the complexity, with the structure, with the depth of fruit, to be able to hang on for a decade and possibly longer, but right now drinking really nicely. The Black Oyster Catcher just behind, and that Constantia Glen, like the Takara Directors Reserve, Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc in concert. And then on the red side, I was down at Annie Else 2 weekends ago, 94 points for that 2013 signature, which is on sale with the 14 and 15 on the Dan Really Likes Wine pop-up store. And there you see Christian Eads in the middle, the editor of Wine Magazine, and Hjal from AMARI, one of the sponsors. I think that's a GS66 in the bottle there. Lily's got a big smile. Why not? 94 points, the best performing red wine in that 10-year report. And we'll have a number of those wine estates, including Annie Else and Takara with Christian Eads, on the show next Thursday as we unpack the 10-year report in a little more detail. Now, this is the really big one we've got running on Dan Really Likes Wine this month. A 60,000 Rand stay at De La Graaf. Add in the flights down from Cape Town and the hospitality. This is about an 80,000 Rand prize between Dan Really Likes Wine, Airlink, and Norman Goodfellows, who've got a pile of De La Graaf, either online or at their 7 stores. Buy any bottle in the month of March, and you will be on your way, if you're the lucky winner, down to the Cape, out to Stellenbosch, and staying at De La Graaf for 2 nights in absolute luxury. Any bottle does the job. Well, if I were you, I might buy more than just one. And that is what we've got for the moment. We also have a festival to talk about, and that is our Classique Festival, which kicks off in about 2.5 weeks' time. So let us meet not just 4 people who are going to be exhibiting, but a 5th one is going to be running around madly, trying to keep everything together, but she does it effortlessly, as she did at the Cape Wine Auction. Darielle Robertson is the director of the festival, and we've also got very exciting young producers, including one in the form of Caesar, who is on his honeymoon, which we are shamelessly interrupting. Let's welcome our 5 guests who join us on the show for a very special edition. Guys, lovely to have you all on and joining us. A warm welcome, not just to our director, but to Siphiwe Katjene and to Michael from Ayepyep. We mentioned Sazi a moment ago, and we are hoping to have our director of Khulu on in just a moment. This is probably the single most expensive show we've ever had Yeah, because I didn't read the small print in the email Sazi sent me, and I now have to pick up the cost of his honeymoon, and apparently they're in the Maldives for a month. So we'll have to sort that out, Darielle, afterwards. I see Cornelia is here as well. Cornelia, lovely to have you. Before we jump into our producers and talk about a really exciting time for bubbles in South Africa, let's find out from our event founder exactly what is happening and why everybody should be so excited, because Darielle, you are back. It's been we had a little bit of a gap, but you were back last year, back again this year, and this is one when people in Johannesburg find out the Cup Classique and Champagne Festival is on its way. Tickets tend to go very fast because you throw a hell of a party.
Oh, Dan, I'm so excited to be back. I think last year was great. It was just a little bit of a teaser of what is to come. But this year I think it's going to be bigger and better, and I'm really excited. We've got some fantastic new wineries that are on show. And I think it's a time for Cup Classique to shine. Like you said earlier in your teaser, champagne's really hard to come by. And this is the time for us to come out and taste a lot of Cup Classiques. There will be champagnes at the festival, but dominantly Cup Classique brands. And yeah, we're looking forward to a great party with live music. Ayepyep's come on board, and we've got our sponsor of Sanlam Private Wealth on board. And tickets are really going well at the moment, so they should be sold out hopefully within the next week and a half if all goes according to plan.
Tell me a little bit about Champagne versus Cup Classique in terms of how you've seen perception change since you've been doing this festival, both up here and down in Cape Town, but particularly with regard to the Johannesburg market. My sense is that when you kicked this off, Champagne was very much the headline act, and there was Cup Classique kind of standing a little nervously in the corner. We are here too. You can try us if you want once you've been through all of the French champagnes. Now, though, I think people really understand the Cup Classique brands. They're looking out for them, and they want to taste something that's not just proudly South African, but in many cases just as good, and dare we say it, occasionally better than some of the French champagnes.
100%, Dan. I agree with you. I think the beauty of this festival is that people get to try things that they don't normally try. And often when it comes to a celebration, people that they have to buy a bottle of champagne, when actually a bottle of Cup Classique is just as good, if not better. And I think we've also been lucky to have a number of new Cup Classiques come on the market, and a number of flagship Cup Classiques, which we never had in the beginning, the likes of the Cuvée Club, the private Cuvée from Les Ormerans and the like. And so I think as the years have gone by, so people have become more educated. And I think that's thanks, number one, to the Cup Classique Association. They've done a hell of a job really getting Cup Classique out there, getting people educated about it. And then I think the beauty of shows like this is that we have some of the winemakers come up, and some of them are behind their stand, and they're able to talk to the people, explain things. And I always say, do a blind tasting and see if you can tell the difference, because I guarantee you 99% of the time you won't be able to. But then again, we also need our champagne producers there. I think it's always nice to have a taste of what the French are doing, and really be able to taste everything. And that's the beauty of a show like this. I mean, so often you'll go into a bottle store and you've got an event on, or you've got something on like a Monday night, and you have to buy yourself a bottle, and you'll buy something that you usually buy. And this show allows you to go around and taste things that you haven't tasted before. And that's what I urge you to do. Don't take your coupons and go and taste what you normally taste. Go and taste something different. Go and experience what South Africa has to offer, because you will be absolutely blown away by the quality that we have to offer.
We're going to be talking about that quality with the people who make it in just a second. Beyond the bubbles, though, your celebrations are never just pour a glass of wine and kick back thereafter. There's always so much more happening. Headlined usually by a fairly fierce competition to see who the best dressed person at the event is. I assume it's back in blue and white and fighting for the fashion stakes in between the bubbles again this year.
It is, Dan. What we've done this year is we've actually created a female and a male competition, so on both days. So everyone wins the same prize on both days. We've got Field Bar that's come on board as a sponsor. They've been fantastic with prizes, as well as Les Ormerans with some bubbles. And then Benang has hinted at they might be doing a special prize for someone. We're waiting to hear on that, which will be announced on social media. And then Ayepyep are going to be our headline sponsors for the Best Dressed competition, which will take place at 2:30 daily on the music stage. And yeah, we'll have some great scouts out there to nominate the Best Dressed, and then invite you up on stage and see where you get.
I know that you have got another engagement to rush off to. So just before you do, for people who want to come along, we mentioned it briefly at the top of the show, but remind everyone, what are the dates, where it is happening, and how we get there, how we get our tickets.
So the Johannesburg Classique and Champagne Festival, sponsored by Sanlam Private Wealth, is 450 Rand a ticket. It's happening on the 25th and 26th of March at Inanda Polo Club, and you can buy your tickets via web tickets. Tickets are limited. We can only host 2,000 people a day, so we ask you to hurry and buy your tickets, as we only have about 30% of Saturday's tickets left over. So I hope to see you all there. It's going to be a great party, and you're about to hear from some of our new producers, and it's really exciting stuff.
It most certainly is. Darielle, thank you so much for joining us. Darielle is off. She dances at a club in Durbanville, so she's there to spend the rest of the evening. We'll see you up at the festival. Darielle, thank you, and apologies for interrupting your evening, just as we apologise to one of our other guests who we are interrupting in the form of Sazi, as Darielle heads off to jump into her feather boa for the night. And that is a young man who's looking remarkably relaxed for someone who had to tell his brand new wife that he was interrupting their romantic bliss to come and hang out with me for an hour on a wine show. Sazi, I'm very glad you did. First of all, congratulations. Well done, newly married man. How is married life going so far?
Well, thank you so much for having us on the show. Firstly, I'll say married life has been interesting. I mean, not the ideal start. She's looking at me now. But look, we're happy we're here. She understands the game, and she's one of our biggest supporters. So if anything, she demanded we do this.
Well, look, she probably knows she's onto a good thing, because not only does she have a good-looking and athletic new husband, he's also involved in an extremely exciting brand who can give her cup Classique on tap. So you're off to a pretty good start there. And it's a brand that is very, very quickly starting to get a lot of people excited. Give us a bit of the backstory, starting with AMARI. Yoruba, I think, and from my high school and university history days, Yoruba was West Africa and various clans of where we now know as Nigeria and surrounds. Am I in the right part of the world? And if so, what does the name mean, and why did you choose it?
100% correct, but just to give you a bit of a backstory. So AMARI is now 5 years old as a company. However, we've only been marketed 2 years. We actually just turned 2 on the 18th of February last month. And it's essentially the 4 of us, 4 directors, and 2 of us come from champagne houses. So we formerly worked for a major champagne house. And the other 2 are what we call lifestyle connoisseurs. That would be Sia and Leanda. And myself, Sazi and Kgwadi, like I said, came from a champagne background. And we were actually literally out one night having dinner, having some bubbles. And we saw the trend in the market where champagnes, although had the stronghold, people were getting accustomed to and trying MCCs. And we said, guys, let's just try our own MCC. And it started off as a joke. And 5 years later, we have a 2-year-old brand, which is called AMARI. AMARI Lush is our first variant. It is a demi-sec. The name AMARI of Yoruba origins means strength. And the reason we call it strength is because we always say we want to build a strong brand, because it's one thing to be known as a black MCC, but we always want it to be known as a great MCC, because first and foremost, quality is imperative. So that's where it started off. And 2 years later, we've seen ourselves now grow to be in about 40 outlets. We've just recently gone into distribution through Norman Goodfellas, as well as Zulzi online. And yeah, just to name some of our top outlets, they include the likes of Jameli, the Life Grand Group, the Four Seasons Hotel, Embark, which I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here, Dan, because I know that's a regular spot of yours as well as Aurum at the Leonardo Hotel. So we've seen quite great growth in a short amount of time, and we're excited for the future. And festivals like the JCC of platforms where we actually get to showcase our product and show people that we aren't just a flash in the pan brand. We're here to make a statement and to grow and to hopefully become a market leader one day.
And that perhaps inadvertently gives another angle to your name, because you probably needed a bit of strength between the four of you to launch something like a Cup Classique, where when you're making this, you don't make it overnight. It's not right, well, next week we'll have it in stores. The time needed to produce this, to source your grapes, to get it made, to get it into stores, as you say, it's taken a while. How challenging was the journey? How much strength did the four of you need to stick to this plan and see it through to where you are today?
Well, AMARI is actually self-funded, and that was part of the challenge at first, is that, one, we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. We just thought you can just go buy some wine and sell it. And then we found that you actually have to source the grapes and go through the whole process. And all our variants are vintage currently. Our current is a vintage 2014. And we found that was the challenge, is that it's not as easy as just buy it and sell it. So we had to go through the whole process. Tolani is a winemaker and a sommelier himself. Just the tasting process alone took us about a year to find the ideal taste that we were all comfortable and happy with. But I think us being a team of 4, now 5 as well, we found that that's what's helped us get to this point, because everyone has their own specialities and we all do it. Like I do the marketing, Sia does the logistics, Tolani the taste, Leander is the mother and finance. So the fact that we all work together is a testament to how we've gotten to where we've gotten in such a short space of time.
And then one last quick one for you, just in terms of the style. You're spot on, and you clearly read the trend. Demi-sec, you're just seeing more and more and more of in South Africa, both in terms of for the non-traditional champagne or Cup Classique drinker, it tends to be a bit more accessible, but also it sits really nicely with food, and it's just very much on trend. So was there a stroke of luck to that, or were you guys pretty certain we know where this direction is going and we're going to ride this wave?
No, we were very strategic in choosing a demi-sec as our first variant for 2 reasons. One, because like you said, when people start off in drinking bubbles, they generally prefer something more sweeter. Actually, more than anything, they prefer a dough before moving to a demi-sec, and then a semi-sec, and then a brut. So our whole strategy was just to be more accessible into the market, to give people something that they're comfortable with. And then once we launch the brut, at least the brand will be established. The other reason is, and it's quite simple from a numbers point of view, is that if you look at the number of bruts in the market versus the number of demi-secs, it's a lot easier to compete and get onto menus when you're competing with less competitors. So for us, going to outlets and going to restaurants and going to distributors like Norman Goodfellas, it's a lot easier to say, here's one demi-sec versus your other 10 versus here's one brut versus your other 100, and establish a brand that way. So to answer the question, very strategic and very deliberate. However, we do plan on growing and launching a brut, and then from there, different SKUs as well.
There is plenty on the horizon for a very exciting brand. We'll get more of it in a second. Let's jump over to the House of Azari and Siphiwe. Welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. A fascinating story in terms of our first brand on the show tonight. What about your Cup Classique house? It's got a wonderfully grand name. Tell me a bit more about the story and about how this particular brand got going. Just on mute there, Siphiwe.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Correct.
The brand House of Azari was inspired by the vision of a classy, elegant, and sophisticated woman, which is me. I launched my first beverage, the House of Azari, which was established last year, 2022. It's still new in the market, introducing the MCC Brut Rosé and the Nectar Rosé. And my the name Azari, it's extremely personal. The reason I decided on the name Azari, it's because I'm a very spiritual person. I wanted the name that speaks to me, something that is very close to my heart and my life experiences. So I decided on the name Azari, which is technically invented name inspired by the Hebrew name Azariah, which means God helped me. So I wanted to start this journey with something that is very close to my heart. Hello.
We've got you. I'm listening happily to the stories, Siphiwe.
Yes. So the House of Azari is produced by Hopenberg Wine Estate in Stellenbosch. And I had an opportunity to be involved in the whole creative process, deciding on the balance between the sweet and the bitter of the MCC.
And in terms of choosing this particular direction, deciding bubbles was what you wanted to do, what was the background to that? What put you on that path to where you are now?
I remember I decided between the two, the MCC and the wine, but I thought because my favorite is MCC, I've been drinking MCC my whole life. Let me do something that I like, something that I'll be passionate to talk about.
Which you obviously are, and you're on the road. How long now has the product been in market, and how have you found it so far? What sort of response have you had to what you've produced?
It's been in the market for 2 months and a half, from the 16th of December. It's still new in the market. It's been doing well. We are on macro online, and we have contracts with few launches and the few small establishments that we're working with. So we're still very small, we're still growing.
But growing, I'm sure, with a lot of excitement and confidence. If we think back a moment ago to Caesar's comments about the development of the market for Cup Classique, it's clearly something you're tapping into, that whether it's people going to festivals like the one that we see at the end of the month, or simply ordering bottles when they're out for dinner or out for drinks with a few friends, the trend for South Africans to be drinking Cup Classique is growing, and that's something I'm sure that you looked at, and that helped to fuel your decision that this is where you want to be.
Definitely. I'm still new in the industry as well, coming from a totally different background. So I'm attending the courses as well, and researching and reading a lot on the MCC.
So you are just 2 months in, so it's still all really, really new. What was that feeling like when you got that first bottle in your hand and you knew that this dream that you'd had, now it was sitting, it was real, it was tangible, you could actually open it and pour a glass? What was that moment like, Siphiwe?
That was the best feeling ever that you can imagine. I'm ecstatic. I'm very excited about this new venture, and I want to see it grow.
Well, we're going to find out in a moment exactly how it is set to grow. We're battling a little bit with Team Khulu. I think, Kgwadi, if you want to try us, let's see if we can bring Kgwadi in, but I think we're having a few issues with signal. No, all right, we're going to try and rope her back in a second. Let's head over to Michael then. And Ayepyep, we've had a couple of interesting names around stories. Michael, welcome. Lovely to have you on the show. And give me the story behind Ayepyep.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, I think very, very, very interesting story. A bit of bittersweet moments talking about the story, and I'll tell you why. So my partner in the bubbly business has just passed away now in November, and may his soul rest in peace. So his name, Opa, popularly known as DJ Somebody. We've been friends since childhood. Grew up in the same neighborhood, literally in the west side of Pretoria, and yeah, like I said, we've been friends all along. I personally relocated into Western Cape, Cape Town in 2015, and that's where my love for both wine and bubbly actually began. I was historically a whiskey fan, but living in the Western Cape, you can only but imagine what you have in your disposal, and therefore one did quite a lot of wine farms every second weekend with my wife and kids, exploring different wines, exploring different bubblies, and also networking in the same respect, because part of what I started to realize is the opportunity and the gap that exists in the market. But where the name actually came from is in 2018, or rather 2019. when I bumped into my partner in one of the events here in the Western Cape. He shared an interesting story about the fact that he's just come back from Monaco for a week where he was DJing, and actually it was a sponsored trip by Verve, because he owns a chain of restaurants called Ayepyep, where he sold the most Verve in the whole country per restaurant. And as an incentive, they took him to Monaco. And I said, oh, well, if you're doing that much for Verve, don't you think there's an opportunity for you to do this type of thing for yourself? And he looked at me, he's like, where do I even start? I don't even know a winemaker. I don't know anything. I'm an end consumer, at least a seller of the goods. And that's where the idea emanated from. I mean, I don't want to belabor the point and share the whole story, but that's where the idea was born between the two of us. The name itself, what that means is it's actually a what's the word? It's cheers in slang in Kamo, back of the woods where we come from. Every time we used to cheers, a couple of people used to use the name Ayepyep instead of cheers. So it's a celebratory, happy, excited name, and made a brand out of it, and currently has a chain of restaurants named after the product, and hence why.
There we go. The background to Ayepyep and the Ayepyep lifestyle lounges, which I'm sure some of you will have spent some time in. How much did that experience, that understanding that kind of world, and the time you, and in particular, Opa, your knowledge of the lifestyle world, influence this decision to go into the world of bubbly, to start producing it, feeling that there was definitely a space that you could take advantage of? I think we might have just lost Michael there for a second. We'll try and get him back in a moment. But good news is I think we have Kgwadi with us. We're winning some battles and losing others on the connectivity front. Kgwadi, welcome to the show. I think we've got you now. Lovely to have you on, and lovely to have the Khulu brand on. Give us some background on the Khulu brand and your story within that. How did it touch down? How did you get into this particular world? We are not having a lot of fun. I suspect that the curse of load shedding somewhere around the country might be an issue. We'll try and get back to both Michael and Kgwadi in a moment. Let's head back to Sazi, though. And Sazi, when you started, you sat down with your mates, you decided, right, this is a great idea. You probably had a fair amount of confidence in where you were going, but you now sit in a world where, as we've mentioned earlier in the show, there is so much pressure on champagne. How much realistically do you feel, as a new up-and-coming brand, this gives an opportunity for somebody like AMARI, like the three other brands on the show this evening, not just to have more of an impact in South Africa, but to maybe go beyond our borders and start telling that MCC story, that Classique story, in parts of the world where up until now it's been a largely champagne or maybe Prosecco story. Is that gap there for the taking now?
Yes, definitely, Dan. I think more than anything, our primary job is to start breaking the negative perceptions around Cup Classique locally, because I think traditionally people have always seen Cup Classique as inferior. And I think that's more to the reasoning that champagne is from France and anything imported, because it's not from here, is seen as more premium. However, we disagree wholeheartedly. And I think, as Darielle said earlier up front, is that you find that Cup Classiques can be, in many cases, better than champagne. So our first and primary job is to break that perception. And then from there, use the current socioeconomic conditions where we know that money is tight right now. So people can't necessarily afford the champagnes they used to have. Also with the shortage, the prices of those have gone up. So there's a big opportunity for us to step into that gap and be the brand of choice, or be the bubble of choice as a category. From an export point of view, we're already seeing that we're getting demand from our neighboring partners, such as Mozambique, Botswana, and Angola as well. And that is definitely something we're looking into building. I think from a strategy point of view, our goal is to establish ourselves in South Africa first, and then go into Africa, and then hopefully one day go into the world, where just the way Prosecco's come and infiltrated SA, I don't mean that negatively, we want to do the same thing in Italy perhaps, or do the same thing in America, where we feel like our brands and the quality of our brands will be received well anywhere in the world, because that's how good they are.
Tell me a little bit more about the product itself. Where are you making it? What's your process? How much time has it got before it lands in bottle? A little bit of the geek speak that gives us some background.
So without giving away too much of our trade secrets, we do source our grapes from the Stellenbosch region. And then Golani and the team then make it into what we currently know as AMARI. Our current vintage has been 6 years on the lease. And like I said, it is a demi-sec, but our dosage is about 33% sugar levels, which means that we're quite a dry dosage. So quite a dry demi-sec rather. And the reason for that is deliberate for two reasons. One, we didn't want something that was overly sweet because we don't want to just compete too much with the current leaders in the market. So we want to own that small niche of like semi-sec, demi-sec. And two, to be quite frank, we're all brute drinkers, but we knew we had to go to the market with a demi-sec, but we wanted something we could also drink every day. Hence why I even have some on my holiday.
Making that honeymoon all the more enjoyable, I am sure. You're 5 years in, you're 2 years in market. What's the biggest lesson you guys have learned so far?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that we thought it would be easy. We thought we'd launch because we are a Black-owned brand, we're a quality brand, people would just take it to it and it would fly. And the reality of the session is quite the opposite happened. We've had to toil and get stuck in terms of tastings, getting liquid on lips, going to outlets ourselves. Myself and Sia have done a lot of the legwork in terms of actually going to the outlets, selling it in. Sisa, who's head of our ops as well, we do the trainings ourselves. So we've learned that in order to build a good brand, never mind just an MCC, there's a lot of legwork that needs to go into it, and that legwork needs to come from us. So, and it's been the biggest glory because we've seen our baby grow as a result of work that we've put in physically, daily. So, yeah, I think that's the lesson learned, and also the school fees around, for instance, service, there's so many small things that you don't realize you have to pay for. The foiling that has to be imported from France, which means you have to pay in euros, which obviously with our rand makes it a bit more challenging. And those are the small things that we've had to learn along the way, that the school fees and the lessons learned that have got us to this point now.
It sounds glamorous, doesn't it? Let's make some champagne. Yeah. It's going to be so much fun. And 6 months later, you're living in your parents' garage and eating 2-minute noodles on a regular basis.
Don't say that out loud, because my wife might be mad at me when she finds out we have to move.
Mrs. Ngcobo, you are in for a rougher ride than you were anticipating. Let's jump over. We had Cornele. We've lost Cornele. We're not having a good run with Cornele, but we do have Siphiwe, so let's head back to her. What about the lessons you've learned so far, Siphiwe? We're still very early on in the journey. What have the biggest ones been? What are the biggest challenges been so far?
So what I've realized is that many consumers, they don't know the difference between champagne and Classique. They don't even know the difference between Classique and sparkling wine. So you have to explain every time especially when we do the tasting. And the other thing that I've realized that is not an easy market, and that's what is it Mr. Ngcobo said. It's not easy. That's what I've realized. It's gonna take long to break through into the market, but it needs patience, especially if you have passion and interest. Then I think you will have to be patient. It's gonna take long to get return on investment.
And part of that patience involves often hitting the streets, dropping in on restaurants, going to festivals like the Classique and Champagne Festival that is on the horizon. You've got a great opportunity over this upcoming weekend to tell your story and to introduce people to the brand. What are you telling people when they come to your stand at the festival for the first time that sets you apart, that gives you a point of difference, that says to me as the guest, right, this this is the bubbles I want to try because it sounds really, really cool?
I always tell people that our brand, it is an exceptional brand that is an epitome of quality, class, elegance, and luxury. So we're different from the other brands. That's what we preach.
All right, it's a very compelling selling point. What has the response been so far in terms of getting it out over those 2 months? What's the feedback you're getting on the product?
It hasn't been easy. It's been difficult, especially with restaurants. It's very few lounges, like I said, that we have contracts with, but we're still in talks with others. So the macro online, it's not working well as we thought, but hoping that in a few months' time or in a few years' time, we will break through.
I think you and Caesar have probably got a glass of wine to share as you discuss the challenges of starting up a new brand. Speaking of challenges, our challenge has been network based for part of today's show, but I think we might have Cornelis, so let's have one last crack and see from Khulu. I think we might just have Cornelis with us. Do we? No, you're breaking my heart, Cornelia. We're going to have to make another plan to get you on the show when the network is being a little kinder. I know Michael is still very happily with us, so let's jump back to Michael. And the story that you've had has got a really nice background. A lot of what you are doing at the moment, especially over social media, the last few months, you've been paying tribute to a dear friend who's such an integral part of the story. As this story now continues to unfold, what are you learning up until this point? What do you feel you have to do over the next year or two to take what's been a pretty good start, but turn it into something that's more meaningful, more impactful, and ensures that this brand becomes properly sustainable?
Yeah, can you hear me, Dan?
Loud and clear.
Okay, so I think, as part of a reflection post the passing of my business partner, I've obviously now joined hands with his brother, who's gladly agreed to be my new partner, is to say, how do we continue to, keep this dear friend of mine's legacy going and growing? And one of the key things that we've realized is a big part of our business has been in most of these restaurant chains, obviously given the name, and we've also penetrated quite a lot of the markets in outskirt areas, whether it's Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Wetbank, in some instances, Lesotho and Bloemfontein. But the thing is, how do we sustain what we've started and created? Because if I think about what we've done as a vision for our bubbly or our Classique, if you taste it, and when you do one day, you'll feel that it's a lot more softer than a normal brute, because the aim was always to say, how do we introduce non-MCC drinkers to start drinking MCC, especially in a brute, because it's not always easy to start drinking MCC, I think to one of my colleagues' point, with a brute. But we've changed that game, because what we're saying through our brute and our brute rosé, is that you can be a first-time MCC drinker using this, because the bubbles are a lot less harsher. You can drink, more than one, because it's not as potent. And really, we've gotten a lot more feedback around how it's refreshing to get a bubbly that's less harsher. And hence, we're thinking even of going into demi-sec in the near future, using the same kind of methodology or thinking to grow our market base and market share in that context.
And demi-sec is very much a winner for a lot of brands at the moment, and it's growing in popularity. So it's definitely a train to jump on board with. Give me a bit of detail, the grapes, the winemaking process, how you're producing, what you're producing, and where from.
Yeah, so our bubbly is produced from Franschhoek by a very, very top winemaker in that end of the woods. Our bubbly is a blend of a Chardonnay and a Pinot Noir. Again, we've kept the sugar content very, very low at 10 grams. just to ensure, like I said, that non-bubbly drinkers can enjoy it. Our bubbly stays about 12 to 15 months on leash, just to ensure that we can get that ultimate end taste that we're looking for, and also secondary fermentation to enjoy the original bubbles that comes with it. And it's through that, that we've actually also realized, and even doing some of the research with our, it's done almost exactly the same as the same way as a champagne, like all kept classiques, I guess. The only difference is we just can't name it that. And we wager our MCC probably tastes somehow even better than those. So yeah, that's kind of our making of our bubbly.
And making it in a style that is going to be appreciated by many people at the Johannesburg Cup Classique and Champagne Festival. I'm going to get one more word from you in a moment, Michael. Before I do it, we've battled with Cornelia, but we're going to have her on the show very, very, very soon, Cornelia. But let me go back to Siphiwe and just ask you for a vision, Siphiwe. And I'm not sure how much you've looked into that, although I find entrepreneurial thoughts generally have this running through their head most of the day. 5 years' time, where do you stand? Where does the brand stand? What have you achieved when I have you back on Dan Really Likes Wine and you're reflecting on the years 2023 to 2028?
The plan is to grow the business, to take our bubbly outside South Africa as well, and to have other MCCs. At the moment, we only have 2. Before the festival, on the 25th of March, we'll have our 3rd one. Currently, we have the MCC Brut Rosé and the Nectar Rosé, and towards the end of March, we'll have our Brut Blanc de Blancs, and we're planning to have more of that.
And will all of those be available for tasting at the Cup Classique and Champagne Festival?
We're only going to have 3 at the festival.
No, I think 3 is a pretty good start, and I suspect you might have some rather long queues for those. All right, so that's the vision for Siphiwe and for a brand that's still just 2 months old in such an exciting stage. Sees a little further down the road. 5 years' time, ideally not sleeping on a couch in your parents' garage. Maybe 5 years' time, the twins are at nursery school and the little one's just arrived and marriage is just blissful, because it always is. Where's the brand in 5 years' time, Caesar?
So quite simply, like I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest thing for us is to establish ourselves locally before we even look at exporting. And our big goal is, as you know how hard it is to actually get into the bricks and mortar of owning a farm, is to one day actually own our own farm. House of AMARI is what we want to call it. And more than it being a wine farm, we want to create a place in the Cape Winelands where people can just come and enjoy AMARI wine and to enjoy lifestyle that is associated with the brand. So be it a wedding, conference venue, hotel, almost like a telegraph. And we're dreaming big here, where it's more than just about the bubbles, it's about the bubbles experience or the brand experience. And then eventually from there grow into other SKUs, like we said, launching a Brut soon, hopefully, and then moving into a rosé, and then maybe some variations and innovations in that field. But ultimately, the big thing for us is to be known and be recognized as a top brand in South Africa, not just as a MCC, but as a brand in the greater sphere of marketing.
It's 5 years in, Sazi and his team with their story, and I love the intent and the focus and the determination, although that's probably looking out the corner of his eye and realizing his wife needs to make sure that they get to go on holidays every year and that this brand works out. It will, because it's got the right people doing it. They're making some lovely bubbles. Let's wrap up with Michael. Michael, a quick glimpse at the future. I know you're wanting to pay tribute. You're now working with John's brother, and you're looking ahead to where you're going. You've mentioned some of the things you're doing. What about just the essence of the brand and by extension South African Cup Classique? Is this a horizon that you're looking at really confidently, really happily, thinking this is a space that's only going to grow and get bigger and better?
Yeah, most certainly, Dan. I think we would like to grow our own independence as a brand. I think thus far We've had quite a nice journey in terms of association with the restaurant chains, but I think if we want to, grow and really compete in this space, we will need to consider how we grow our own independence as a brand, and therefore we're having a lot of strategic discussions around what that means for us, as well as, like I said, we've entered markets that are not traditionally bubbly markets, but we've managed to crack it to an extent where we feel that we've got a different proposition at what we want to achieve. We're not really going into markets where bubbly is already heavily established, but rather going out in the outskirts as well as inland, particularly in areas where it's not really traditional to be drinking bubbly in those markets. And we're trying to also find the right pricing structure to ensure that this is a product that's affordable for the target LSM that we're chasing after. And again, I think thirdly, my partner and I had a vision and had a dream around, it's not just a drink or a bubbly, but the naming, the name must be catchy. It must be a lifestyle. When you think and remember this brand, you must think about, what else? Is it a brand that you can pair with food all the time? Is it a brand that you can always have in parties and weddings, and also in spaces, like I said, commonly not known for having bubbly? And therefore, how do we penetrate those spaces? So really the dream is to compete in the future with MCCs and be part of the MCC community, and ensure that, because we think our proposition is different, we can be understood for what we want to do in this space. So yeah, that's kind of part of our journey and our ambition for the next future.
There is incredible energy to our collective of guests, and that energy is on show, both in person and in bottled variety, when the Cup Classique and Champagne Festival takes place at the end of the month. 450 Rand are your tickets. They come with your glass and your tokens to go and sample anything you want. But I suspect if you've watched this evening's show, that your top 3 choices are already in play. And although we weren't able to get her on the show, which was hugely frustrating for her and us, Khulu Fine Wines will be there as well, amongst a long, long list. But look out, you've seen the faces, you've heard the voices, you now know the people behind the stories. Siphiwe, lovely to have you on the show. Really excited for your journey. It's early days, but you've clearly got a lot of determination and a great product, so best of luck with it. Michael, honouring that legacy of Opa, and it's a proud one indeed. And Sazi, you've got a lot of ironing to do, a lot of foot massages to give, a lot of dinners to cook for giving up an hour of your honeymoon, but we're very grateful for it, and lovely to see that story unfolding. And I think what comes through from all of you is not just that you've got a story now, but there are so many more cool and exciting chapters on all of those stories still to come. So best of luck. We're going to have you all back on the show again soon. And until then, enjoy your time at the Cup Classique and Champagne Festival. And Sazi, enjoy the rest of that honeymoon. I do believe Springs is lovely at this time of year. So have a wonderful time, guys. Thanks so much for joining me, and best of luck with 3 great brands, Siphiwe, Michael, and Sazi, with the House of Azari, AMARI, and Ayepyep. Guys, thank you very, very much indeed.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dan.
So there we go. Catch all 3 plus Kgwadi from Khulu and a whole pile of others brands that have been part of the Cup Classique scene for many years. People like Antoinette Rupert, like Graham Beck, Krona, Bon Courage, Benguela Cove, Steenberg, and many others. There'll be a couple of champagne houses, Deutz amongst them. But I think the headline act for this year's festival is going to be these new, young, black-owned brands taking Cup Classique, be it a drier style or the demi-sec style that's so popular at the moment, into fresh new territory that's doing a really important job for the South African wine scene. That wraps us up for this evening. Remember, get to web tickets if you want to grab the opportunity to be at the festival, and join us again on Monday. It is Concours Mondial time. The world's best Sauvignon Blanc judges and writers are in Franschhoek next week, and they are going to be preceding that arrival with a show. We've got 4 or 5 of them joining me to talk about how Sauvignon Blanc is doing in the world at the moment and how the Concours Mondial, the world's biggest Sauvignon Blanc judging competition, found its way to a little corner of Franschhoek. More great news for a South African wine industry, which, as we saw through the course of the show this evening, is flourishing, and for all the right reasons. Have a great evening, enjoy your weekend, and look out for some really cool stuff with us at Norman Goodfellows at the moment, including that Delair competition and the chance to head down to Delair for 2 nights of luxury with flights from Airlink. That does it for tonight. Have a great evening. See you next week. Goodbye.